The detective said the killer left no fingerprints, only paw prints, leading from the crime scene, across the roof, and into the woods where no man could possibly walk. Nightbound Bloodline presents 5 true crime stories with an unexpected twist. We are drawn to true crime, to the clinical dissection of motive, the puzzle of evidence, the dark calculus of the human heart. We map it, logic it, categorize it. It makes the darkness feel manageable. But what happens when the evidence refuses to obey our laws? When the motive steps out of a medieval woodcut? When the predator in the story is no longer human? These are accounts from the ragged edge of the investigative file. Cases where the official report ends, but the witness's truth begins. Stories not of who, but of what. Our first correspondence comes from a man we'll call Robert, a retired homicide detective with 23 years on the force. A man who built his life on facts, on ballistic reports and blood spatter patterns. He sent us this not to be believed, but because he could no longer carry the weight of the unexplainable alone. This is his story. Story 1. The Silver Creek Stalker. My name isn't important. For the record, you can call me Robert. I spent most of my adult life in a major metropolitan police department. I've seen the worst people can do to each other. I stopped believing in monsters a long time ago. You see enough human cruelty, the imaginary kind, it just fades away. My last case before my pension, it was supposed to be simple. A real tragedy, but straightforward. A hiker, a young woman, found in Silver Creek Gorge. The scene was violent, excessive. The medical examiner used terms like predatory and avulsive. The media dubbed him the Gorge Stalker. We had nothing. No witnesses. No useful forensics at the scene. Just rage made manifest. And then, a week later, a second victim. Same M.O., but deeper in the state park. That's where I was that night. October 29th. The air was crisp, smelled of pine and damp earth. A blood moon was supposed to rise later. We'd set up a remote command post at a trailhead. Just me and 2 junior detectives, hoping to catch anyone suspicious, maybe a trophy hunter returning to the scene. The woods at night, they're never quiet. Not if you really listen. Crickets, the rustle of possums, the wind. But around 1 a.m., it all stopped. Not a gradual quiet. A switch was flipped. One of my detectives, Chavez, he looked up from his coffee and just said, "You hear that?" It was the silence, the heavy kind. Then came the smell, rolling down from the ridge above us. Not decay, something alive. Musky, wet dog, but rancid, like an animal that lived on spoiled meat. Chavez gagged. We drew our sidearms, clicked off our flashlights. We were professionals, but that smell, it triggered something old. In the back of the skull. We heard it then. A sound I still can't place. Not a footstep. Too solid. A thud. Like a heavy sack of grain dropped from a height. Then another. Thud. It was moving. Parallel to us, along the tree line. Staying just out of sight. Chavez shined his mag light towards the sound. The beam caught it for less than a second. Between 2 towering pines. It was upright. On 2 legs. But the silhouette was all wrong. The shoulders were immense, hunched, blending into a thick neck. The head was elongated, canine, but the proportions. A man in a fursuit? No, the way it moved when the light hit it. It dropped to all fours in a motion that was liquid, effortless. No man could move like that. It was a single, flowing collapse from bipedal to quadrupedal. And then it was gone. We gave chase. Stupid. Protocol out the window. We were cops, and we'd seen something. We crashed through the underbrush, our lights jerking wildly. Then we found the spot, where it had been standing. The ground was soft. They weren't footprints. They were paw prints. Deep, splayed, with clear claw marks at the tips. But they were easily 10 inches long. And the stride, the distance between them, it was impossible. No wolf, no bear, makes a stride that long on 4 legs. It would have to be leaping. And in the center of the clearing, under the now rising blood moon, was a small, neat pile. The second victim's missing jewelry. A locket, placed there, like an offering, or a taunt. The case was closed 2 weeks later. An anonymous tip, a mentally unstable drifter with circumstantial evidence. He confessed. The brass needed it closed. I retired, but I know what I saw in that beam of light. I know what made those prints. The gorge stalker wasn't a man. We weren't hunting a serial killer. We were trespassing in a predator's territory, and it was watching us the whole time. The twist wasn't in the who. It was in the what. And that changes everything you think you know about the darkness. My darkness used to have a human face. Now it has claws. A predator's territory. The line between man and monster, not just blurred, but severed. Our next story comes from a different kind of watchman. Not of city streets, but of deep, silent forests. A park ranger stationed in the vast, untouched wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. Her name is Maya, and her report details not a single creature, but a congregation. Under the ancient trees. This is her account. Story 2. The Cascade Conclave. I'm Ranger Maya Evans. I've been with the Forest Service for 8 years. My job is to know my territory, every deer trail, every weather-sculpted rock, the smell of the air before a storm. I deal in facts, fire risks, invasive species, bear activity. Folklore is for campfire stories. It started with the missing hunters. Not unusual alone, but 3 in one season, all in the same remote grid sector? Sector 7. We called it the Cathedral. Old-growth fir so dense the canopy blotted out the sky. The searchers found nothing. No gear, no remains. Just silence. Then the sounds began. Not animal sounds. Deliberate sounds. I'd be on patrol and hear wood knocking. Not a woodpecker, but a slow, rhythmic talk from 3 different points around me. A triangle. Once, I heard a voice. It sounded like a woman sobbing, just off the trail. It was a perfect mimicry, but it came from a thicket of blackberry thorns no human could penetrate. And it stopped the second I called out. The night I saw them, I was tracking an illegal campfire signature deep in Sector 7. The air was dead still. No wind. That's the first wrong thing. In the mountains, there's always wind. I used my thermal scope, and I saw them. Not heat signatures, cold signatures, darker than the surrounding forest. Humanoid shapes, standing perfectly still among the trees. 7, 8 of them, in a rough circle. They were tall, too tall, and slender in a way that seemed stretched. And in the center of their circle, on the ground, was a hot, bright signature. The campfire. They were just standing around it, watching it. Not a single one moved. My blood turned to ice water. This wasn't a poacher camp. I radioed it in, my voice shaking. As my transmission crackled out, every single one of those dark, cold shapes in my scope turned its head, in unison, towards me. I didn't run. Ranger training, never run from a predator. But this wasn't predation. This was observance. I slowly backed away. The thermal shapes didn't follow. They just watched. And then, from the trees above me, a voice whispered down. It wasn't in my ear, it was in my head. A dry, rustling sound like dead leaves skittering on stone. It said one word, mine. I found the illegal campers the next morning. Alive, but they were different. Hollow. Their memories of the past week were gone. They kept babbling about the tall shadows and the quiet gods. They were medically fine, but they were empty, like something had been scooped out. The official report lists exposure and psychological distress. I transferred out of Sector 7, but sometimes, on still nights, I look at the dark line of the forest and wonder, who is watching whose territory? We think we patrol the wild. What if the wild has always been patrolling us? Mine, not a threat, but a statement of fact, a reminder of a much older claim to the land. The horror of the Cascade Conclave isn't in a chase, but in that chilling, silent observance. The feeling of being assessed by something that does not see you as a peer or even as prey, but as something transient. Our third tale shifts the landscape from deep wilderness to the very heart of suburban comfort, a place of manicured lawns and two-car garages. But as we'll hear, the most unsettling invasions are not of places, but of people, of memory itself. This account comes from David. Story 3: The Man Next Door. I'm David. I'm a history teacher. My life was routines, grading papers, walking my terrier, Archie, waving to Mr. Peterson, who lived at the end of the cul-de-sac. He'd lived there for decades. A quiet, polite man. A little pale, kept to himself. The neighborhood fixture. The disappearances started about 2 years ago. A jogger, a family dog, then a teenager on a bike. All within a 3-mile radius. The news called it a tragic coincidence. But I started noticing patterns. They all happened on overcast days, or at dusk. And Mr. Peterson, he'd always be outside during those times, tending his roses. His roses were unnaturally vibrant, a deep, velvety crimson. One afternoon, I was walking Archie. It was one of those thick, gray days where the light seems drained from the world. We passed Mr. Peterson's house. He was in his driveway, polishing an old, black sedan. Archie, the friendliest dog alive, froze. His hackles rose, and he let out a low, continuous growl I'd never heard before. A primal sound. Mr. Peterson looked up and smiled. A perfectly normal smile. But his eyes, they didn't crinkle. They were flat, dark, like looking into 2 deep, still wells. He said, "Afternoon, David." His voice was pleasant, but he used my name. I don't recall ever telling him my name. I stammered a greeting and tugged Archie away. As we walked, I felt that smile on my back. Cold. The twist, it didn't happen to a stranger. It happened to me. I woke up one night last summer. The air in my bedroom was frigid, and I had a memory. Vivid, crisp, like a film playing behind my eyes. I was 8 years old. I'd fallen off my bike in front of Mr. Peterson's house. I'd scraped my knee bloody. In the memory, Mr. Peterson, looking exactly the same as he does now, had come out, helped me up, and patted my head. I remembered the chilling coolness of his hand. But that's impossible. The Petersons moved into that house when I was in my 20s. I checked old photos, town records. He wasn't there. Yet the memory is real. It feels more real than my actual childhood. It's my memory. He inserted himself into my past, into my foundation. I moved, sold the house quickly. I told my wife it was for the school district. But I know, he's not just a man who might have done terrible things. He's something that feeds on more than blood. It feeds on your history, weaving itself into the tapestry of your life until you can't trust your own mind. The man next door wasn't a suspect. He was a curator, and we were all just exhibits in his quiet, suburban collection. The worst part isn't the fear. It's the doubt. What else in my life is real? A violation not of the body, but of the soul's own ledger. What is a person but the sum of their memories? To have that edited, coldly and precisely, it is a theft beyond measure. Our fourth story descends from the suburbs into the depths of the earth, where the dark is absolute and the walls themselves seem to breathe. This comes from a team of geologists on a routine survey. They went to map limestone. They found a map to something else entirely. This is Lena's story. Story 4: The Chorus in the Cave. Dr. Lena Markov. My field is karst topography, caves. I've been in hundreds. The dark doesn't frighten me. Silence does. True silence is rare underground. There's always water dripping, rocks settling. Life. This was a new system in the Appalachian foothills. Radar showed a massive chamber. My team of 4 entered. The air was unusually warm and carried a scent, like ozone after a storm and wet clay. We reached the chamber. It was vast. Our headlamps couldn't reach the ceiling. And the walls, they weren't smooth limestone. They were covered in thick, pulsating veins of a bioluminescent fungus. A soft, blue-green light pulsed in a slow, rhythmic wave, like the chamber was breathing. Then we saw the fossils, embedded in the walls. Not prehistoric animals. They were humanoid. But the skeletal structure was wrong. Elongated digits, a cranial ridge, and they were posed. Not in death throes. They were crouching, reaching, as if frozen in movement. Dozens of them. A gallery. Our cartographer, Ben, whispered, "It's a tomb." That's when the silence broke. Not with a sound, but with a pressure. A subaudible hum that vibrated in our teeth and bones. And then the whispers started. Not from one place. From everywhere. From the walls, the ceiling, the air itself. A multitude of soft, overlapping voices speaking in no language I knew. It wasn't hostile. It was curious, analyzing. Our communications tech, Maria, panicked. She screamed, "Stop it," and slammed her hand against the cave wall. The chamber went dark. The fungus light died instantly. The hum and the whispers cut off. In the blackness, absolute and suffocating, we heard a new sound. A dry, rasping, collective shuffling. Like many thin, brittle things moving against stone. It was coming from the walls. From where the fossils were. We ran. We didn't map. We didn't look back. We just followed our lines out. When we finally burst into the daylight, we were all gasping, coated in cold sweat. The official report cited hallucinations due to low oxygen and unusual fungal spores. They sealed the cave entrance with explosives. Standard procedure for an unstable site. But I keep the core sample we took before the whispers. The limestone is shot through with microscopic, fibrous structures. They're not mineral. Under a microscope, they look like fossilized neural filaments. That cave wasn't a tomb. It was a hive. And we weren't listening to ghosts. We were listening to the walls remembering. And when Maria struck them, we annoyed them. A hive of stone and memory. A chorus of minds not extinguished, but embedded. It redefines haunted. It suggests a consciousness woven into the very geology of our world, sleeping in the bedrock beneath our feet. What ancient, patient intellect did Lena's team accidentally stroke into wakefulness? Our fifth and final story returns us to the urban landscape, but to its forgotten arteries. The storm drains, the steam tunnels, the empty subway lines after midnight. This is where Mark worked, and where he learned that in the city's shadow, another city thrives, with its own rules and its own rulers. This is the account of the Tunnel Watchman. Story 5. The King of the Crosstown Tunnel. Name's Mark. I was an inspector for the City Transit Authority. My beat was the old, decommissioned lines, the ghost tunnels. You get used to the dark, the drip of water, the rats. It becomes normal, boring even. The reports started as graffiti, not tags, symbols, complex, spiraling things etched deep into the concrete, sometimes 6 feet up a wall. Then, the missing persons, not your usual. These were the city's ghosts already, the unhoused, the ones who slipped through the cracks. No one filed reports, but we noticed. Their camps would be found intact, food still cooking on a little stove, but the person gone. I first saw the movements on a thermal camera. We were surveying structural cracks in the Crosstown Spur, a tunnel abandoned in the 50s. The screen showed the usual heat blooms of pipes, but then a shape. It moved with a speed and fluidity that was insectal, a blur of heat zipping along the ceiling, then down a side passage. It was man-sized, but its gait was all wrong. It seemed to flow over obstacles. My partner, Jim, laughed it off. Big rat. But his laugh was thin. Then, we found the throne. That's what we called it. In a service chamber off the main spur, someone had built a seat from old subway seats, rusted rail, and polished bones. Animal bones, mostly. I hope. Around it were offerings, canned food, bottles of water, cheap jewelry. And it was clean. No dust, no rat droppings. A sacred space in the filth. The encounter happened a week later. I was alone, taking final measurements. The air, always still, grew colder. And a smell hit me, like hot copper and wet cement. I turned. He stood at the far end of my light beam. He was tall, painfully thin, wrapped in a tattered, gray coat that seemed to melt into the shadows. His face was pale, narrow, with eyes that reflected my flashlight like an animal's. But it was his smile. It was too wide, showing too many teeth that were too sharp, too pointed. He didn't speak. He hissed. It was a sound that seemed to come from the vents themselves. And in that hiss, I didn't hear words. I understood a concept. A clear, sharp thought implanted in my head. You are in my kingdom. You are a guest. Do not overstay your welcome. I didn't run. I backed away slowly, my tools forgotten. He watched me, that terrible smile never fading. When I reached the service ladder, I chanced one look back. He wasn't there, but perched on the bone throne was a large, sleek rat. It stared at me, unmoving. Then it chittered, and from the darkness all around, 100 other chitters echoed back. A chorus of approval. I quit not long after. The official line is that the missing are just transient population drift. But I know, the city has a basement, and that basement has a king. He keeps the order down there. He takes his tribute, and he watches us, through the grates, through the cracks. We think we're above it all. We're not. We're just the surface dwellers. There's a whole ecosystem beneath our feet, and we're not at the top of that food chain either. 5 stories. 5 fractures in the world we think we know. The detective, the ranger, the teacher, the scientist, the inspector. All grounded, credible people whose vocations are to observe, to protect, to know. And all of them brought to the precipice of something else. The twist in each of these true crimes was never about a hidden accomplice or a secret identity. The twist was the genre itself. It was the moment the investigation into the known collided with the undeniable presence of the unknown. These are the cases that get filed under other, the testimonies that become footnotes, the truths that are too jagged to fit into our orderly boxes of motive and means. This has been Nightbound Bloodline. Thank you for listening. Until next time, sleep with one eye open.